Hi, welcome to the Careers Unfiltered podcast with Mentoria. You may know your dream job, you may know your dream career, but do you know what goes on behind the scenes in your chosen career path? Have you been able to separate the glamour from the reality in your career? Do you know the good, the bad, and the ugly in your career? Most people walk into their careers without having any idea in terms of what really happens in that career, how to crack success, how to get the right job, how to grow in the career. Don't be those people. Get the ins and outs of your career path through some of the best subject matter experts and industry professionals that Mentoria will bring to you on the Careers Unfiltered podcast.
Just like traditional psychology would get somebody from a -10 or -8 to 0, people realize that if you have a depressed person and you remove the depression, you don't necessarily get a happy person. What you get is, at best, a neutral person. Positive psychology is about moving somebody from 0 to +5, or somebody who's already at +5 to +15. So, for the longest time, psychology, or traditional psychology, was studying mental illness, was studying depression, studying stress, and so on. So, at some point, when Professor Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania became the president of APA, the American Psychological Association, he said that, look, one of the agendas should be to look at what's going well. So let's start studying success, studying people who are doing well, who are flourishing, and sort of reproduce that. And that's when, so it's a pretty recent field. So positive psychology is studying what's going well, focusing on strengths, focusing on what makes a good life, focusing on well-being, flourishing. So that's in a nutshell what positive psychology is all about. So it's about, just like traditional psychology would get somebody from a -10 or a -8 to 0, people realize that if you have a depressed person and you remove the depression, you don't necessarily get a happy person. What you get is, at best, a neutral person. Positive psychology is about moving somebody from 0 to +5, or somebody who's already at +5 to +15. So that's really what it's about. Oh, it depends. I think based on which domain of positive psychology you are in, you might be doing different things. At some of my classmates from Missouri who were in sport psychology and the positive sports psychologists. So then you're working with athletes, you're looking at what the athlete is doing well and building on that. You're looking at what strengths the athlete has and using that wisely in the team and that sort of thing. If you are doing the sort of work that I'm doing, which is mostly working with corporates as an organizational consultant or a psychologist, then you're doing that for individuals through one-to-one coaching. You're doing it for teams. You're doing it for the organization itself, because a lot of companies still, call me only when there's a problem, But there are about 10% of companies which do it the right positive psychology way, where they call me and they say, there's no problem with this team. There's nothing going wrong here. Let's look at what's going right and build on that. And that's what you'll, if you're doing positive psychology work, that's really what you'll spend a lot of time doing. See, it being quite a new field, there are a lot of programs out there. A lot of the work, positive psychology, started in the University of Pennsylvania. So if your school or college has a humanities specialization early on, because later when I was doing my master's, I was thinking I would have been better off having done BA psychology somewhere in India than having done mechanical engineering, considering the path I took, because I could see some of my classmates, they knew the foundation of psychology was so solid, and I had to sort of pick that up with years of work. So that's certainly one thing that you could do. I don't know if there are enough colleges in India which offer an undergrad exclusively or an honors sort of program in positive psychology. But any good university like TIS or NIMHANS, or which has a good undergrad program, you can specialize in positive psychology. Okay, then I think the Rolls Royce of programs to do is from the University of Pennsylvania. There's a program called MAP, Masters in Applied Positive Psychology. It's conducted by the founder of Positive Psychology, Martin Seligman, teaches sometimes, and this Angela Duckworth, who teaches sometimes. So they have, it's a slightly complicated program to do from India, which is exactly the reason I didn't do it, because you have to be in the US for 1 weekend a month, and for a period of 12 or 18 months. So that's becomes logistically a bit difficult to do, and also sometimes expensive. So that's a program you could do. The University of East London has the oldest program in Europe. They also have a master's in applied positive psychology. Anybody could even do an undergrad program in psychology. In fact, I would recommend that. It's good to have an idea of clinical psychology, an idea of organizational psychology, an idea of everything, then specialize in positive psychology if that's what you choose to do. Okay, that's a good route to take. As far as PhD is concerned, I think the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences is doing some interesting work in India. NIMHANS, of course, doing some interesting work, though NIMHANS is so huge that a lot of focus is not on positive psychology. Tata Institute of Social Science, while they focus on social work, they're doing some work on it. I think IIT Delhi, which I think also houses the Indian Positive Psychology Association, their Humanities and Social Sciences division has interesting programs. From an organizational point of view, maybe Claremont Graduate University, CGU, they have a great positive organizational psychology program. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, he's from there. He used to head that department. Yeah, I think that's really the route to take. And as far as PhDs are concerned, there is no such thing as a positive psychology PhD per se, but you could follow some of these people and do a PhD in a related field, or just in strengths, or just in gratitude, or just in a particular aspect of say, subjective well-being. And I think the smartest thing to do is to reach out to the authors of your favorite book or professors and have a master's degree by then, and then request them to take you on for research. And you might have to be in that university for some time. Melbourne, in Australia, Melbourne University is doing some interesting work in positive psychology as well. They have a positive psychology center. Well, one of the things that people could do is to first work in an organization in an allied field, like how I discovered training through technical training, and then I got into training and consulting, and then I started a consulting company, and then became an independent consultant. Now, it's almost impossible to plan that journey, sort of pre-plan that journey. So one thing that you could do is work for a company. Like, I know somebody who's done positive psychology, but is working for a consulting firm, and the big 5 or 6 consulting firms, they will have a space for you where you could use your expertise, not all the time, but you might end up learning business as well as becoming a domain expert in a certain domain or industry, say startups or say financial services or something like that. And you'll also get to use your positive psychology. So I think that's one way to go. You could join an organization in the HR function. Now, that market is not amazingly mature in many parts of the world. So in many companies, even today, HR, admin, training, they all come under one large umbrella. There are some companies where they have a very mature HR function, and training is a separate thing. Leadership training is a separate thing, and there are 3 or 4 people doing it. So maybe that's a good way to go. Definitely work for a consulting company at some point. I would recommend that, because that gives you the feel and flavor of starting your own practice, where you're not stuck in a company with one boss and one client and so on. You're working with multiple clients. You're sharing best practices. You are looking at different expectations, different value systems of different companies. And that's a great sort of exposure to have. Also, you could, after that, if you want to start your own practice, it's important to have people. And the challenge across the world is there are people who are great, have great business ideas, okay? But when it comes to execution, they falter. So you have to sort of have big business acumen, at least have 100 clients who trust you. In all these years of experience, that you have people who trusted you and will come in for your services, that's a good time to start on your own. Because I've seen a lot of people start unable to sustain and fizzle out, run back to a full-time job, you know. So I think it's good to have your ammunition ready, have clients who are going to work with you and asking you to do work for them because you're full-time in a company and you're unable to do that. That's the time to quit, and do something on your own. And of course, you have to also build an ecosystem around managing all the dimensions of your business and business development, meeting new clients. Also depends on how ambitious you are. If you're looking at becoming the next Amazon, then you're better off going to B school, going to Wharton and doing an MBA there, you know. Now, if you say, I'm a language trainer for Spanish speaking consultants, now you're specializing. I'm a language trainer for Spanish speaking consultants in the telecom industry. Now you're really specializing. If somebody looks for that on the internet, they're going to fall on your doorstep. So I think it's a good idea for you to specialize. And when you specialize, you go and talk about that to your client. It's also a great sales pitch for an organization or an individual with respect to positive psychology is a lot of times people are fixing problems. We don't have good processes. Let's make good processes. Right from school, the child is poor in math, you go for math tuitions. The child is great in English, now forget that. So there is a sense of that. So offering to clients that service of, let's look at your system, your organization, your team. If Mentoria is already here today, you must be doing some things right. What are those 20 things that you're doing right and which are going well for you? And why do clients work with you? Let's pick those things and expand on that and do more of that. And not to neglect problem solving, but I think that's a good pitch. People love to, when you go in as a consultant, look at what's going well rather than say, fix this, this is wrong, that's wrong. That's an approach, not to take away from that, but to look at and expand on what's going well. That's, I think, a good pitch to offer to anybody who you're offering your services. I can only speak for myself, but I can tell you what some of my friends are doing and, some of my classmates from the US are doing. It'll be a combination of meeting people. I think this has to be a big part of your work. If you're a positive psychologist or you're a consultant and you're not interacting or meeting people, you should be worried. Okay, so that's one part of your work. A second part is you will be doing some sort of group sessions, either a training program or a small workshop or a session like this. That will be a big part of your work. Another thing that you would do is one-to-one sessions or conversations. This seems more like a one-to-one session, though it's really not, because there's an audience here. So that's another thing that you would do. You will have meetings with clients and stakeholders to understand what's happening in an organization, what they require, capture notes, bring that back to your office and process it. You'll have to work on some proposals and send that out. So that will be another part. Then there are regular nuances which are there in every job, like getting on a conference call, sending and responding to emails, sticking to your promises of whatever you said you would do. I spend a lot of time thinking because sometimes clients I'm coaching are going through something. So I think so if you ask me, what do I do in the office? Morning, I wake up, I have tea, meditate, I get dressed and I come to the office because that's part of my work ethic. I don't work in my shorts and, if I'm in my office, I'm at office at 9 o'clock or 9:30. Then I take a tea break, I take a lunch break, an evening tea break, and then I stop work by 6. And I always stop work at 6 throughout my life, even when I'm working for companies, So sometimes I'm just looking out of there's a window on the other side. I'm just looking out of the window and thinking about what to do or, what would work for a particular client. So I think that's a big part of it. A lot of times as a positive psychologist, you're paid to find answers to people's challenges or move them to the next level who are already doing well. Linking research to practice. Like you read this great article about something. How do you use that? And how can one of your clients or team use it to become a better team? And trying that out, and it's got to work. And if it doesn't work, then see where you went wrong. So, looking at the research, and using it. There's no point reading a whole book on relaxation if you don't know how to make somebody feel relaxed. So bridging that gap, I think, is a big part of what I think good positive psychologists, or I would say just consultants and psychologists, should do. Yeah, I mean, I do get that a lot because I usually introduce myself as a psychologist, because when you uh, tell them you're a positive psychologist, they think you're using an adjective, right? You are using an adjective, but they think you're a psychologist who's positive. So they think you're a positive person. Well, you could be a positive person, but that has little to do with the field. It also helps if you're a positive person. So being a motivational speaker doesn't dismiss you or disqualify you from being a positive psychologist, but that's certainly not a that's a myth. So if you could be a positive psychologist who's a consultant, you could be a coach who's a positive psychologist. You have something called positive leadership in sport. And there are a lot of sports psychologists who are doing what's called positive coaching, helping the athlete look at what they're doing right and expanding and working on that, bringing their true values. What's really wanting to make them win, or do they not care at all? Find out those things is an important part of the story. So yeah, I think that's a myth, and I've also been a victim of it sometimes. Maybe, one of the things, like you said, you already alluded to, people think when you're a positive psychologist, they're flaunting your positivity, and I think some people out there feel that pressure of, oh my God, I'm going to say I'm a positive psychologist. What if tomorrow I feel sad? What if tomorrow my life doesn't, I mean, that could happen in any field. Nobody should be saying I'm an oncologist, because what if they get cancer later? It could happen, and it has happened. So there is that challenge of people not holding their identity strongly. There's that element. There is also the element of people not thinking that this is just about positivity. What about all the problems that I have? And usually when you talk to people, they're talking about problems. Even when you catch up with your friends, oh, you know what happened last week? This guy got laid off. Oh, you think that was bad? Let me tell you what happened. That's really how it goes. So there is, of course, that challenge of not enough focus on what's going well and the positives. There is also a challenge of managing, if you're a positive psychologist, you have to understand the industry well. If you're working with a client, you have to understand their work pretty well. You got to understand their challenges. So if you don't have an understanding of business and what companies are looking for, how could positive psychology really help? You have to be able to plug it. It's a tool, but you have to plug this tool into, it's like SAP. Now, if you have a tool to do your accounts, it has to be plugged into your business. So the same thing you have to do, and that there is a challenge of, if you're not interested in that, then that could become a problem. Yeah. I think the other challenges are really general. This is a contact sport. You will meet a lot of people. You will interact with people. If you don't like meeting people as a person, then you have to really rethink your decision. If you're the kind of person who likes to sit in a cubicle, be by yourself, and exit in the evening, then you're better off doing some data analytics or something like that, which is, so there is also that. I think the other challenges are probably pretty common across fields. If you don't like working hard, then it's not a place to be. If you don't like taking instructions from people, it's not a place to be. If you don't like being in the same building from morning to evening, and you're with a consulting firm, like a lot of my clients are finding it challenging to bring people back to office, So I mean, those challenges are not positive psychology related, but they are challenges all the same.